It's like arguments on the internet. Okay.
Hmm.
I used to fucking get into them all the time. I used to wade in. I used to be like the Kool-Aid guy, just like or just carrying a big hot jug of my opinion around with me, just smashed on through the walls, right?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Expert Commander. I'm your host, Christopher Armour.
My name is Nick Gonzo. It's nice. It's nice that we could have this time together, public.
And Nick just showed me a trailer for is it Deadpool 2? It's the Bob Ross trailer for Deadpool 2, in which Ryan Reynolds is dressed up as Deadpool, who is dressed up as beloved meme artist Bob Ross.
Just a quick one. Did you watch that on the toilet just now?
I did. Thanks for giving us a little glimpse behind the curtain there.
I was impressed.
A little bit of inside baseball there.
So it's a good trailer, I think.
Yeah, and I just think it's really the whole Deadpool story. I think is kind of hilarious to me because it's clearly a passion project for Ryan Reynolds, having spent so long basically just being typecast as leading man in an action film because he was too conventionally handsome for Hollywood to think of to put him in anything else.
Well, the thing is, right, is the people of Deadpool. No, the people making
people
Deadpool,
of the good nation, Deadpool, the proud
people
nation
of Deadpool. Yes, is your captain speaking. Like the people who are making Deadpool, they know what people expect from it.
Sure.
They know what you're gonna get from it. It's so when you that's the thing is that I watched the trailer for the Avengers 2 or no 3. Oh my god, Age of Ultron happened.
I try to forget that the Avengers 2 happened as well.
That was a bad film. I don't care what anyone says. It was just not that great. But yeah, so I watched the trailer for the latest one, Infinity War. Because I went to see Black Panther, which we'll talk about more about in a second. I went to see Black Panther. They showed the Infinity War trailer beforehand, as is a prerogative. But my first thought when I saw the Infinity War trailer was the first Avengers film was the Avengers punching aliens in two armed aliens in New York City. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you have the groundbreaking Age of Ultron, which had them punching two armed robots in a Soviet city, post USSR made up country, and now they're taking the bold and unusual method of having aliens show up in New York and a fictional country. And giving them forearms and having the Avengers punch them. So by this point, you kind of know what is happening with Avengers movies. Is that
I kind of feel like we've got a good handle on the Avengers formula at this point.
Yeah, this is going to be sort of sad bit. People are going to be like, but who gave us the right to do these things? Sort of moment. Because whenever you talk about any sort of international world police, you got a question whether or not that's the right thing to do. Somebody gonna tease somebody's death, possibly. This time maybe somebody we even care about because who gave a shit about Quicksilver? Am I right? But
you're right.
we got a handle on what is gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
And exactly the same thing with Deadpool. You know the character of Deadpool. He's was invented by Rob Liefeld to be a gun and sword delivery system. Who just turned out to become cool by swearing a lot. But yeah,
is there like a qualitative difference between those two? Because Avengers Infinity War is coming up, and it's still it's still about Thanos. I think his name is like the bad guy that was teased at the end of the Avengers, and it's like Avengers came out in 2011, I want to say, and it's like we're 6 or 7 years down the line. It's still about this guy. Like, does anybody still care about this? Does anybody even remember?
It's an interesting one because they've most definitely played their hand out with having him be more involved in the Guardians of the Galaxy
Right. Yeah.
So if you like, he's been involved in the Guardians of the Galaxy. He's been the bad guy in that. He's been mentioned in all those films, but he's sort of been forgotten about in the in the major thing. So it's they've done an interesting game of how far can we push it before people stop caring.
Yes. Yeah. That's That's
I think they've struck an interesting balance, because I'm interested to see what happens. I can't tell you they're not gonna get my £500 or however much it costs to go to the cinema these days. But yes, I mean, but with Deadpool, you know what to expect. Sword, bullet, delivery system. So you've seen the first film. Why create because the trailer for the first film involved everything you'd expect. Deadpool being silly, insults, swearing.
Being aware that he's in a comic book film.
Yeah, exactly. The event, the X-Men turn up, and then we know what Deadpool 2's gonna be. So they didn't bother advertising it the way you'd expect them to. So they just went, our trailer's gonna be Bob Ross themed. Boom, done.
Well, that's what I mean about that. Is there a qualitative difference? Because you know what you're going to get from the next Avengers film, and in this, you kind of know what you're going to get.
There's no need to advertise it.
Well, yeah, exactly, and in the same way that there's no, exactly what you're going to get from the next Deadpool film.
Yeah.
But somehow the one feels a lot less kind of cynical and a lot less kind of a chore than the other one.
Whenever I see a new, I have my attitude to superhero films now is very sort of, I'll see what they can do, because there's
sure
they've managed to make heroes like Ant-Man film was just surprisingly amazing, and I didn't expect it to be, so I just sort of go, we'll see what happens, now, but there's always a bit of me that thinks, well, this could be terrible.
Yeah.
And you're watching sort of, you watch the trailer for the Avengers, and I'm not necessarily filled with the same form of excitement everybody else is. My first thought is, there is a good possibility that this could be Age of Ultron too.
Sure, definitely. But we've clearly got past the point now where we were in the late 2000s, early 2010s, where, because the superhero genre was still on kind of a precipice, it's like, if one of these bombs, then it's going to take the entire genre down with it. And that kind of added a sort of level of, I suppose, meta tension to each film, where you're like, okay, I'm not really into this film, but I really hope it doesn't bomb, because if this bombs, we're not going to get any more good ones.
Yeah.
But we're so far past that point now.
I went to see Black Panther, and it was good, but it wasn't just good. It was genuinely incredible.
Okay, so where on the scale would you put this with something like, I don't know, this is just my own aesthetic preferences, but with Captain America,
the Winter Soldier
at the top. Well, yeah, the Winter Soldier I thought was very good. And I don't know, Thor 2 probably towards the bottom end, or Iron Man 2 at the bottom end of the scale. Where would you put it?
Yeah. Right, so this is a hard one, and the reason being is that it's sort of doing that thing where people say, "Oh, I don't like superhero films," but that's like saying I don't like pasta nowadays, because it depends on what sort of superhero film are you talking about. So it's a
because we're in a world where Deadpool and Batman versus Superman exist under the same banner of superhero films. It's almost a meaningless label anymore.
Yeah, so Winter Soldier is most definitely a the Winter Soldier is it's like a sort of spy film. It's tense and rich in suspense, and then you've got Deadpool, which isn't, and then you've got I think a great way of describing Ant-Man as a heist film.
Yeah, that's reasonable, actually. Yeah.
And it is. So it's sort of tough to sort of explain where Black Panther fits into this pantheon, but it's probably the most politically smart Marvel film. It is
not saying very much, but
Oh, I don't know, because Winter Soldier, Civil War, both of those cover some issues. It's not.
Okay. I'd forgotten about Civil War, but Civil War was a good.
Civil War was a good movie. but it's the most culturally smart film, and it genuinely says something. But like, there was a great review of it where somebody was saying that it didn't have any fight scenes except for the middle, the beginning, and the end. But I kind of see their point, in as much as there are some action sequences, and there are quite some large action sequences in it. But it's the focus isn't on punching; it's on developing characters and how they fit into a world that is incredibly well crafted, but also how this incredibly well crafted world exists within the confines of our own poorly crafted actual reality.
Sure.
And it actually feels like the first ever Marvel film to address how superheroes fit into the real world.
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole thrust of Watchmen. The idea that, okay, so in the Watchmen timeline, it's exactly the same as ours until the publishing of superhero comics, and in our timeline, they inspired other superhero comics, and then in the Watchmen timeline, they inspired people to go out and become superheroes. And obviously, like, the overriding thesis of Watchmen is that this is a terrible idea. Don't do it.
I always thought that I always thought that the sort of the difference was that, because there are no superhero comic books in the Watchmen timeline. They have pirate comics.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because they don't need to have them, because there's no need for that escapism, because superheroes exist around them.
Yeah, exactly, and it doesn't end well. So
yeah,
if we're talking about this kind of intersection between comic books as escapism reality and what if superheroes were real reality, like where on that scale does Black Panther fall? Does it take the Watchmen line or not?
The thing is, right, so it doesn't take the Watchmen line. Okay. Because, the Watchmen line is bleak as shit.
Well, it's nuclear war, so
the Watchmen line
don't get much bleaker than that.
Exactly. Really, Civil War did explore the right of people. That was the film that introduced Black Panther as well. Let's not forget that.
Yes, yeah,
Black
sure.
Panther was introduced in Civil War, So basically, it sort of says, what right does somebody have to be protector, right? Which is sort of the theme in Civil War as well. Like, what right do these people have to tell us how we should live our lives? But also, and probably more pertinently, it sort of begs the question, why do certain people get to be saved and not others?
Okay.
Which is something that's never been explored, I don't think, in a superhero film. It's really done incredibly ham-fisted in stuff like in like Age of Ultron, where it's like, you saved everybody, but like, not everyone gets saved. But like, we're talking like the Wakandans are a secret African nation who live off their vibranium, which is like a super hard metal that has allowed them to develop technologically far in advance of any other nation on Earth, but they keep it a secret to try and protect themselves. But like, at the same time, the sort of rich, technologically advanced Wakandans are doing this. People of African descent, African Americans, other African nations, they live in poverty. They live in poverty. They live in fear of being killed, and like, the question begged by Black Panther is not, why do certain people get to be saved by superheroes? This is like, why do certain people get to be saved, like in the greater sense of it?
Yeah, sure.
Why do certain people get to have better lives than others?
Yeah, and it's the difference between like being saved on like a one-off by like a caped superhero and being sort of lifted out of terrible circumstances by if you want to be Marxist about it, it's by greater access to the means of production.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's an incredibly clever movie, and it is so well designed. Like the Afro punk futurism in it is just something you don't see very often.
Yeah, I was about to say actually, I've heard it. I've heard the aesthetic written up as Afro-punk futurism or just Afro-futurism, and I was just like, that's it. Like as soon when I saw the trailer and when I saw everything about it, I was like, that's a really interesting aesthetic, and I can't think of how to categorize it. Or I can't think of a word for it. And then it was like, oh, Afro-punk futurism. I thought, that's it.
I follow a few Afro-punk and Afro-futurist Instagrams and stuff like that, because I think it's because my sister's on holiday at the moment in Poland.
Sure.
And she posted that it's nothing like a trip to a place you think is going to be similar to your own country to remind you how you-centric your existence is. So, she expected
that's
Poland.
A good comment, actually.
She expected Poland to be just like England, but everyone speaks a different language. But it's like such a different culture, such a different place, and she just, and you forget that because you live in a world that's just so you-centric.
Of course, yeah.
But to have a film like Black Panther, it's great because it's showing you a different aesthetic, it's showing you a different thing, and if you can't be challenged by a movie, then don't go to the fucking cinema.
It's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned about the whole sort of expectations of like Poland, for example, to be basically the same but with a different language. Like I felt the same way when I went to Prague. And it's the difference is sort of written into the architecture in a way which is really interesting. Like we were staying in in this hostel and up on like the fourth floor or something, and you wake up and you pull back the curtains, and directly on the building opposite, at eye level to the window, was a bust of Lenin. And it's like the Russians did get out of Czechoslovakia in 1989. Like, why is that still there? And I think that's it does sometimes take an aesthetic shock like that to sort of realize how difficult it is to escape your own perspective.
Yeah.
And as I've said, obviously fumbling around trying to find the word Afro-punk futurism, it's obviously not an aesthetic or a style that I'm all that familiar with. And if it takes a giant Disney-funded superhero film to make more people aware to that style of art and that whole aesthetic, that's great.
It reminded me of the first time I watched Blade Runner, the first ever Blade Runner, because the first Blade Runner had a very different view of the future than I was expecting, but also involved a lot of Eastern culture in its design.
Oh, totally.
I don't know if don't know if Blade Runner was the first film to decide that there would be a massive involvement of from Japan and China in development of Western future, but it certainly wasn't the last person to explore that idea either.
No, quite. We mentioned Blade Runner 2049 on a previous podcast, and I did really like that those elements were still there, kind of.
Yeah.
But not just in like a fan service way. And especially with Blade Runner as well, like it comes across not so much in the fact that there's Japanese text on the billboards, but the fact that all the models on the billboards are Japanese, or are Far Eastern, and it sort of gives you a sense that the standards of beauty have kind of shifted, whereby the societally accepted standards of beauty in this world no longer are skinny white European women, and that sort of says a lot more about how this society has shifted, like more than anything else could. And certainly I know that the Black Panther aesthetic has kind of come in for some criticism for it like fetishizes the exotic and the quote unquote primitive aspects, but when design elements like that are sort of written into the aesthetic, you get a sense of the history of the world. It's good world building, isn't it?
I do believe that's such a criticism from people that haven't been to Africa.
Sure, yeah.
Well, I mean,
I count myself among that.
I was talking to my friend about this because what were we talking about? We were talking about the BBC TV series Taboo, and how I hadn't watched it because it just seemed like they were talking about that sort of mystic Africa that doesn't exist, which is one nation, which has one culture. But Africa, obviously Africa has
the great country of Africa.
yeah. But like Africa has so many different countries in it, and each one has its own different culture. But like when I was in Namibia versus when I was in South Africa, look at me just naming places I've been. But they've got different, each one's got different culture. But like the art and aesthetics of tribal Africa, I suppose, will be, for want of a better term, is so heavily ingrained in the contemporary elements of it, So it's because it's like saying, it's like, oh, it celebrates the primitive nature of it, and all modernist buildings have a degree of neoclassical Greco-Roman architecture in them.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like, get over yourself, Western society. Turn down for what? It's like, it's like he's like, we're saying that if it was an African developed nation, it would not be still held in place by the arcane and antiquated laws and designs of before, just like we are.
Yeah, and because for example, as you said, a lot of modernist architecture is beholden to those to the trappings of previous schools of architecture. Doesn't mean at all that the ideology, I suppose, or the ideas behind those styles of architecture are in any way prevalent today.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're not, but it just means that you're taking influence from whoever.
It's like music. I was talking to my sister's boyfriend Callum today about fretless guitars.
Yeah.
Because they were like, oh yeah, because like a lot of bands like having fretless guitars, fretless basses, because it allows you to do a wider variety of notes.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, why would you need that? Like surely all notes are notes. It's like, well, in Western music there are about 12 notes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but in like other other cultures there are far more. Like look at Japanese music and Chinese music, and look at the sort of the post-rock that comes out of these countries that uses so many different like arrangements of notes that you wouldn't expect from Western music, because they've got so many more. So if you've built your artistic development in solitude as well, I like to point out, that's a very 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 big point of Black Panther, is that it's a nation that has kept itself to itself. You just basically would be still actually one variance of the society that built it, and if though you'd have more notes in your music, you'd have more patterns and things that were based on the traditionalism that you had in front of you. So fuck that criticism is what I'm saying here.
Yeah, and the music analogy I think works really well, because there are microtonal guitars as well, which aren't fretless, but the frets are in different places, and they're kind of all split up and kind of jumbled up, and that's a key part of the musical tradition from lots of different places. I mean, there was Italian composers who used a lot of microtonal motifs and ideas in their work. I think it's also a big part of certain like Turkish music as well. I'm not too clear about that. It's the idea of something developing in a bubble, as you said, and the entire aesthetic of Black Panther and Wakanda. It screams, this is a society which is developed in isolation, and that's not something which says, okay, this is a correct or an incorrect or a wrong or a right or a morally good or a morally wrong thing to do.
Well, actually, it does.
This is an appropriate aesthetic.
It does.
For
like there
that
is a
kind
whole
of society.
there is a whole anti-isolationism message to the film as well.
Yeah, I've heard that actually the villain in Black Panther is weirdly more interesting than most Marvel villains for that specific reason.
Yeah, they're right. So Warren Ellis once said that the best way to write a villain is that they have to believe that they're right.
Yeah.
But I would suggest that sort of Killmonger, as he is called, or Eric, as I like to call him, the reason he's a great villain is not because he's right, which he is, in many ways, but he's completely not because he believes he's right, which he does, but because he is kind of actually right, but his methodology is just completely fucked.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the hallmark of a good villain, isn't it? Where you can sort of say, okay, I can kind of see where you're coming from. Yeah, exactly.
Stop killing all these people, but I see a point.
Yeah. Speaking of music, actually, I mean, I've been listening to the Black Panther soundtrack this week, and like Kendrick Lamar is just balls deep in that entire soundtrack.
He's like such a good musician. It's unbelievable.
And like Schoolboy Q crops up on it as well, and I was like, oh, that's a nice surprise.
That album is great. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, I reckon the same people who sort of I reckon there's a very similar school of people who are the ones who are complaining about it being too tribal and sort of like probably too African, to be fair. Like that's I reckon that's an argument that somebody will have had, is like it's too African. The same people who are complaining that there aren't enough white people in the cast, because like there's an argument that's saying from people who are racist but don't want to appear racist, incorporated, who are like, well, just like, yeah, I get it that you want to have a movie that represents yourself as black people, but you don't need to. There are yellow people and grey people and stuff. Why don't you represent all races rather than just sort of? And I was like, you know what? It's a film about Africa, starring African people who are African, doing African things in Africa. It has white characters in it. It has, at one point they go to South Korea. There are South Korean people in it. Like, it's just such a dumb argument to try and there are so many dumb arguments about it, so many stupid hot takes, and it all just boils down to, we don't want the black people to have the nice things.
Yeah, I mean, it can be quite difficult to distinguish between the two, in the sense that it can be quite difficult to distinguish between kind of well-meaning kind of liberal critiques of it, saying, well, I'm slightly uncomfortable that it's all a bit tribal and it feels a little bit exploitative or whatever. It's difficult to distinguish between that and the people who are actually racist and are just using the language of, like, using the appropriated language of cultural criticism and critical theory to mask that and say, maybe this is a little bit inappropriate, and that's it can be quite difficult to distinguish between them.
I also feel, and this is an important one, is that I'm not qualified to comment.
No, exactly.
I ain't black. I'm a straight white male. I'm the least qualified to comment on oppression and representation, because I'm literally never oppressed and always represented. So,
yeah.
I recognize the fucking horror innate in that, that the world apparently believes that everyone is kind of like me, which is dumb, but that's the way that that's the way the society works, and I think it's entirely wrong. But it's like there's a lot of people debating Black Panther who shouldn't be debating Black Panther. They should be going, well, this is a great movie. What do you think, people who actually are represented in the film?
This was a fruitful podcast.
Yeah, this is a weird one. I always say that when we talk about like real, like last time last episode we talked about my car for a bit. Like I never started talking about like real world things. I always feel really deeply uncomfortable, not because I feel that I'm sort of ashamed to have an opinion, just because I think that I'm very acutely aware in my old age that my opinion matters shit. Like the older I get, the more I realize that, like, realistically I'm just an asshole in a field of assholes just farting out nonsense. Right? What I have to say is no more important than what anybody else has to say. And that's why you should listen to our podcast every fucking week.